Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 20th installment of Project Pixar. This is The Incredibles 2. I am, of course, always joined by the irreplaceable Noah Price. Noah, how are you?
Oh, well, now that you've said that, I feel like I have a lot to live up to, so
Well,
I'm going to try my best.
I know there's a hero in all of us. So if you watch these at all, you know that the first Incredibles film is my favorite Pixar film of all time. Here's a long-awaited sequel, and this was one people had wanted for a long time, and they kept. They didn't. I don't know why they didn't ever want to do it, which I was personally fine with, but they put it off for a long time.
They said Brad Bird was just waiting to come up with the right story for it. He didn't just want to rush it out. You know, he wanted to make sure they had the right story before they went and made a sequel. So,
which is what every artist says ever when making something, and then true to case here, they then just remake the first story again, but worse. So. We'll get right into it. Noah, I'll let you start us off. Who's your favorite character?
I went with Jack Jack.
Nice.
I really liked Jack Jack in this one. He didn't get to do a whole lot besides being a baby in the first one, so it was fun at the end where he got his powers, so you get to see more of that in this one. And he just has a lot of the funniest moments of the movie, for sure. He doesn't, have any dramatic moments or anything that really brings any heft, but he's a lot of fun whenever he's on the screen. So yeah, I went with Jack Jack. How about you?
Good choice. I have to do a repeat of my previous choice, which is Elastigirl. However, I think it's a little easier to pick her in this one because in the first one it was really hard to choose between like her, Syndrome, and Bob Parr. But Syndrome isn't here, and Bob I just don't think is nearly as interesting in this film as he is in the first one. You disagree?
I don't disagree, because I thought he was plenty interesting in the first one, but I do like what they did with his character, and I like the approach. That is one of my more favorite parts of the movie, actually.
Gotcha. Okay, so we'll get into that. But yes, I like Elastigirl. I mean, I've always liked that character. Only really part that is unfortunate is it Holly Hunter is the voice actress? Yeah, you could definitely tell she's 14 years older. I remember when I first saw the film, I was like, ooh, she's got a little like strain to her voice, that she didn't used to have. But still, I very much enjoy that character, and she gets a pretty big spotlight in this one. And as always, they're very creative with the use of her powers. It's not just I stretch and I'm silly. No, she actually the way she'll make different
happy woman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's got some really great moments. So I will go with Elastigirl.
Nice. Yeah, good stuff. Well, who would there be a least favorite character for you in this one?
Well, so my least favorite moment, there's nothing in this film that is a standout, wow, that just doesn't work, that's bad, that brings the film down. So it's kind of more just like stuff that feels weird, and I'm not sure which one bothers me more. One of them is the screenslaver. I think that character is a real misfire, and they had some potential there, they don't use it. But I might go with Jack Jack, and it's not because anything Jack Jack does is bad. He's entertaining. I do like him. However, especially, I think this is the third time I've seen this film. Watching it again, it does kind of bug me that the way most of the problems in the movie get solved is Jack Jack just turns into the right thing, and then he just happens to solve the problem. Like, they've got all the superheroes hypnotized, but he floats up to Elastigirl and whoop, floats her glasses off, and okay, so now they can fight again. So watching it a third time, it's just kind of like, man, I kind of wish they hadn't used Jack Jack to like solve every problem in the film. But I do genuinely,
baby Ex Machina.
Yeah, little baby Ex Machina. But like, I do like the scene with him and the raccoon is very funny, and the scene where Edna is showing off all the powers with the suit is very enjoyable. So if I had to pick, that'd probably be mine. What about you?
For me, it was kind of like the addition of the extra superheroes. I get that it's a sequel and that you want to add new characters and everything like that, and it lends itself to the ending and the climax, and that big fight scene and everything like that. But for me, they're such caricatures that it kind of pulls me away in some ways. Like, oh, there's the German electric dude, but he get like a few lines and doesn't really get to do anything. And of course, the big guy's a Crusher guy, and like and I didn't really like their designs either. Like, they were off-putting to me. like reflux, like
Yeah.
kind of a funny idea, but like when he was first introduced, I thought he was just an old man that got lost or something like that, or like or like he had dementia and thought he was a superhero. I like when he was like saying he had acid reflux. It's like I was like, yeah, this is just an old man who got lost. And then when you see his powers later, I guess it's okay. It kind of makes sense, but
Yeah.
some of these powers, so to speak, they're not very useful.
Yeah.
Like I feel like they aren't very useful or very, sexy, I guess, in a power set kind of way. One guy can like turn his head like an owl.
Yeah.
So woo.
Very C-list powers for sure.
Right. So, yeah, I'd say that was probably the thing. I felt like they could have been, if they were gonna go that route, they could have been more imaginative with the designs and the ideas of like some of these characters.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
That's fair. So what about animation? Was there any standout animation in this film?
Yeah, for sure. The Elasticycle and that whole sequence is really cool. Like, just really well done, and how it like jumps over buildings and stretches when it does it, and she's on the train tracks with it and everything like that. That for me was the standout. So, what about you?
Yeah, I will back up the Elasticycle as well as the final. Well, no, I'll comment on this one. Well, I'll mention this again on music because this is my favorite musical moment too. But the climax where they're trying to stop the ship and watching Frozone like trying to turn the ship, and that last moment where he's just blasting as much snow as he possibly can, and like literally he comes rushing forward to the front of the ship, hits it, stands up on his feet, and you're just like, ah, and the boat is just tilting, and it's just like, oh my, like I'm getting goosebumps. I was like on the edge of my seat watching it, so probably that.
Yeah, that's a good one too, and I kind of like the Void and kind of what she was doing with her powers and the way they kind of did that. So she was the best of the new characters.
Yeah. But I think it's just because of her powers, because in X-Men Days of Future Past, there's a character called Blink who had no character at all, but she was the coolest part because that's just a neat power, the idea to create portals and like send things.
Portals, yeah.
So, yeah.
Good call on the Blink thing, that's a good comparison. Do you remember where you were when you saw it?
I do. I went to a theater I commonly go to, and I had on my Incredibles shirt. It had the Incredibles logo, which was really cool because, it was a packed theater, and I had a lot of people be like, oh, nice shirt, man. That's so cool. And I saw it with my girlfriend and my buddy, and it was, it was very enjoyable. And I knew immediately, I was like, yeah, it wasn't as good as the first one, which I wasn't honestly expecting it to be. Like, that would have been a major shocker if it was truly better. But it was still very enjoyable, and again, I do remember all the people in the crowd being like, oh, he's got an Incredible shirt on. So, what about you?
Yeah, I saw it at a dine-in theater, so
nice.
I had a pretty good experience with that, and I just remember, like, when it was, I loved the Walt Disney opening with the color scheme and the look of the Incredibles thing, and how it kind of opened up into it. I was like, oh, this is really cool. And like starting straight off from like the end of the first one, I thought was really cool. But it was like this. I knew it like going in. I was like, man, this is never going to live up to what I thought it was going to be in my head. So like, that's a hard thing to go into in the first place, with that kind of mindset. And but unfortunately, that's kind of where it was. And then I just I got through it, and I thought it was funny, and I definitely enjoyed it, appreciated it. But for sure, while I was watching it, I thought in my head, I was like, something's not quite right or quite there, and I couldn't put my finger on it until a couple views after that I saw what exactly the issue was. So.
Awesome. No, I can't wait to talk about that. So I'll just go ahead and spoil my favorite musical moment because I kind of said it earlier, and it is that climax when they're stopping the ship and Giacchino's brass is just burn, 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 and just like give you that, oh my God, I'm going to have a heart attack right now. This ship's going to crash. And, Incredibles is one of his best scores. My personal favorite, maybe you would say Ratatouille is better, but, it's always been one of his standout knockout scores. He does a really good job with it. Again, there's just something about that bum 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 bum. The themes are just so strong.
It's a great theme for sure. Yeah.
So what about you?
Wholeheartedly. Yeah, I mean, same thing. Like anytime that the theme kicks in is great. I couldn't really tell you any like if Screenslaver had a theme. I couldn't tell you what it was. Yeah, and there's nothing really new that really stood out to me. So solid, good work, but I mean, nothing really stood out.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Okay, so what is your favorite dialogue, line, or joke?
Yeah, like I said, a lot of the Jack Jack stuff was really funny to me and keeps in my head. So I really like when Bob is looking around the house for him and he's trying to get him to come out when he goes to the other dimension. And he's like, num num cookie,
Yeah.
num num cookie, cookie. And like his eyes are just like bloodshot red and he's just like in a state, like a whole nother state. And now that I'm a father, I completely understand where he's coming from, like with that level of tiredness that you're just like anything to just make this work,
Yeah.
So that aspect's really funny. The way that he interacts with Dash with his math and stuff. Well, math is math, like I don't understand. That was a funny, critique, satire on being a parent and dealing with those kind of things. Also, a lot of the family type stuff is the funniest stuff, the best stuff to me. So when Violet is super upset and she comes into the kitchen, you just see like Bob look over and the freezer slams shut, and you just see like her going to town invisible with the ice cream. I thought that was a hilarious image. And besides that, my favorite moment of the standout moment is Jack Jack versus the raccoon. Like that was the funniest moment, and I love the. It's kind of funny because you like, oh, it's just a raccoon, like he's gonna run away, but like the raccoon actually like takes it personally and like becomes like the villainous type kind of thing, which is funny to me. Like gets a character, and when he gets stuck in the net and Jack Jack starts shooting the laser beams, like that to me, that cracked me up.
You know what that reminded me of?
Seeing the panic.
Yeah, I don't know if you thought of this, but we used to watch wrestling together, and sometimes you'd have wrestlers get stuck in the ropes, and they're just sitting there like, oh, and then the person's like walking towards them with a chair, and I was like getting flashbacks of that.
Yeah, so I loved that moment. That was by far the funniest part and the best part of the movie to me that stood out. So, what about you?
I have 3. So similar to very similar moments to you. And it's when Bob, I wish I could remember the line verbatim, but it always makes me laugh. When Bob takes Jack Jack to see Edna and he shows up at the door and she's like, yes, what is it? And she's like all mad at him. And you just see him and you hear like a, like a baby sound. And she's like, oh my God, what happened to you? And he leans back, he's like, no, it's the baby. But you just see Bob and you think he's like, and she's like, what is going on? Love that. Yeah. Violet, when they run into Tony at the restaurant and she blows water out of her nose, that always makes me chuckle as well. Just because it's such a quick reaction. He just goes, hi there, and she like instantly, as almost, she can't control it at all. And then the one line that always stood out to me from the moment I saw it, and I wish I could remember the whole monologue, but in particular, when Elastigirl is hunting down Screenslaver and you hear Screenslaver like talking to the audience, and she says something along the lines of like, you don't talk, you watch talk shows. And it's such a cool, and again, unfortunately, they don't really do as much with that as I would have liked. But again, there was an element there that felt like it was a good commentary on modern society of like, hey, everybody's buried in their phones. You don't listen to each other. You don't actually engage with each other. You watch people talk and then you talk at you kind of thing. Yeah. I really like that, but like I said, unfortunately, they don't do a whole lot with it. So those would be my choices.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that because that really has a lot to do with why I think the movie fails to some level, and probably that part of me that was like something's off here, and I couldn't make quite make that connection. I think what it is Syndrome was linked with Bob from the start in the Incredibles 1, so he already had a personal connection. And that really helps in superhero films, especially to have that interpersonal connection. Whereas the Devers, the idea is that it's a mystery, like who is Screenslaver. But if you've seen enough of these films, you know pretty much from the moment that she comes in that it's Evelyn. So, the other issue with that is that, so I think a lot of it is with the villain, and I think that the big issue is that her motivation does not connect with the whole screen flavor thing.
Yeah.
The theme of like of people not interacting with each other, interacting with technology. And that satire and the idea of that, for modern day and how that relates to us. That is an interesting idea, and that's worth mining. But her whole purpose is, we relied on superheroes, and because of that, my parents had to die.
Right.
But that doesn't connect with the whole screenslaver thing. It just, okay, so she works on tech, so maybe that's why, but like, it doesn't, there's a disconnect there. And so it never rings true to that character in any circular fashion at all to me. So that would be my biggest thing. That would be one of my biggest things that I would change, would be like, make that connection with that character. Like maybe that it could have been, even if it were, somewhat similar to the first one or repeating beats. What if what if Evelyn, the reason that she knew Evelyn was like a roommate with Elastigirl in college? Mm-hmm. Like that could have been something. But anyway, the other part I would say is that the family, I wish they didn't break them up. I really like the family dynamics of them being together. And again, like Elastigirl's off on her own. It's, it's some character growth for her, but I really like it when they're all together and they get to play off of each other. And you don't get a whole lot of that in this film, so.
Yeah. So I think you're 100% right about the villain. She's definitely no Syndrome. And so my overall biggest thing I would change, and I'll go into the specifics because there's a lot of them, but it's a repeat of the first film. Like, some scenes just feel beat for beat. Again, you have the villain who, I hate superheroes, I want to make them all go away. But again, we already saw that with Syndrome. You have Violet with her high school drama, but we saw that in the first film. Dash being his like, I'm not allowed to just do whatever I want. Okay, yeah, we know. We saw that in the first film. Like you said, breaking them up. And I really like Violet and Dash in the first film, but in this one, they're a little annoying at times, I think. There's a few scenes I'm like, oh my God, you two shut up. Like, just let Bob and Frozone do their thing. And while it's amusing to see Bob at home, now I'm not a father, so I can't appreciate it probably on the level you can. Again, part of me is just like it just kind of drags at times. So that would be my biggest issue, is it feels like the first film again, but not nearly as interesting. And similar to you, I remember the first time I was like, I don't know if I could even tell you what it is about it, but it's just less. Like, it just doesn't engage me, though. And part of it, I think, is definitely the villain. Like you said, Screenslaver's totally disconnected. There is a good idea there. And, it is a cliche in comic book stories and hero stories that, it was someone from my past who... Mm-hmm. I know that's cliche, but there's also a reason that works and why that's used so often, because, like you said, it makes it more personal. So... if I had to look at it overall, that would be... And again, they have the scene where they go to Edna's and Edna makes a suit. And all of that is still enjoyable, but there is this feeling of like, right, but I've seen this before. Like, I saw it. And so I wonder if maybe they shouldn't have... Because it picks up right where the last film left off with the Underminer. And while I understand the desire to do that, I wonder if that was a mistake and they should have just gone in just, a totally different direction. And like you said, most of the last film is the family split up, in the sense that as far as hero work, you don't get to see them all together till right to the end. So it's kind of weird they do the same thing again with this one. And, Syndrome was at least somewhat interesting because the Omni Droid was something that was a physical challenge for all of them, and then Syndrome himself could fight them. But Evelyn can't. She's just a person. So there's no challenge there. The face-off with her is she, like, drains the oxygen from the air cabin, and then Elastigirl blasts her with a flare gun, which is really cool. I really like that moment.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so that would kind of be my biggest, like, overall, is it just feels like the first one again, but not as good.
So leaving it off, like, where does this stand for you in the Pixar pantheon?
Well, I'll give my rankings. We'll give it in our final video for sure. I think it's kind of in the like Finding Dory, Monsters University tier, where they're all those films I think are very good. I don't think they have like an inherent flaw with them or problem like I think Brave does or Cars 2 does or whatever. but they're not to that super high quality. You know, you and I were talking about before this. The first Incredibles film gets me emotional, and it has lines that strike me on an emotional level, on an intellectual level. You know, when Syndrome's big line that, you know, no one will be super anymore, that chills me to my bone. There's nothing in this movie that does that, though. And so I'm very much like, you know, enjoying it. And like, yeah, this is enjoyable. I like it, but it's nowhere near as good as the first. What about you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, same. I definitely don't think it's as good as a film as the first one in any way, shape, or form, but it's definitely enjoyable. And yeah, I mean, kind of sits in that mid tier. I think maybe lower mid tier, but yeah, we'll get into our rankings later.
All right, well, that was The Incredibles 2. That's 2018. We are going to 2019 next, folks, and this next one's a doozy. This is a little spoiler alert, my least favorite Pixar film. So we'll see you then. Take care.
Later.